Good Sunday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, some in law enforcement are saying that it's become a habit that's hard for some folks to break. The habit, leaving guns in unlocked vehicles. Now, sadly, those unlocked cars and trucks have become frequent targets of thieves. Now, here are some of those very alarming numbers. Last year, 2018, nearly 1,200 firearms were stolen from vehicles during auto burglaries in Mobile. And as you see here, that's an increase over the year before, 2017. Now, to make those numbers even more concerning, Mobile police say that 80% of those were taken from unlocked cars. Mobile police say that stolen guns have now been involved in several local murders, including the shooting death of one of their own. Mobile police officer Sean Tudor was killed while serving an arrest warrant in January of this year. Now, the death of Officer Tudor and the increasing number of stolen guns prompted police to say enough is enough. Steve Alexander filed this report in February.
Terrence Sims went for a bond hearing this morning on a murder charge in connection with the shooting death of Christopher Edwards in Crichton earlier this month. During arguments in court, authorities say the gun used was stolen.
It's tragic and it's just unfortunate.
Public Safety Director James Barber told the Mobile City Council this week about 1,200 guns are taken each year from vehicles in the city, and 80% of those vehicles were unlocked at the time they were stolen.
I'm just astonished at that number, 1,200. Am I correct?
That's just the city.
But Barber says the police department and the city are getting ready to start a special campaign aimed at gun owners. It involves PSAs, or public service announcements.
We're working on PSAs on a Lock It Up campaign about the firearms. There's also been incredible interest because of the recent shooting of Officer Tudor from the news stations about creating these PSAs again to really drive that message over and repeat it. They will come with flyers and as well as stickers to go on the cars about locking up these firearms.
And Barber says there's another step gun owners can take to help police officers. Record your serial numbers.
Only about half of the weapons that were reported even had the serial numbers recorded. And so even though we are recovering these weapons, we have no way of knowing that we actually have a deal with a stolen weapon.
Police want gun owners who have weapons in their car to make sure vehicles are locked. But even better,
absolute safest thing to do is to remove the weapon.
The Officer Tudor tragedy and, of course, the alarming increase in the number of guns stolen from unlocked vehicles has prompted Mobile City officials into looking for ways to stop it. And here to tell us what the city is doing, Mobile's Executive Director of Public Safety, James Barber, and Chief of Police, Lawrence Batiste. Now, we'll talk with them in just a moment when Perspectives continues.
Each month, more than 90 guns are reported stolen from unlocked vehicles, creating the potential of serious injury or death.
Lock it up.
Many violent acts and crimes are committed with stolen guns.
Lock it up.
According to ATF, stolen guns pose a substantial threat to public safety.
Lock it up.
Be responsible. Take time to record your handgun serial number and secure it from thieves. Lock it up.
Lock it up for me.
And of course, what we just saw was the public service announcement from the Mobile Police Department. It was created to emphasize the message, keep your guns locked away and in a safe place. And we'll hopefully understand why the gun owners are a very important part of this problem and their solution to the problem. And joining us again, Public Safety Director James Barber and Chief of Police Lawrence Batiste, and both of you all very involved in the campaign as well. First, let's start with how did we get to this point to where we've got this alarming number now of guns being stolen from cars, but most importantly, unlocked cars?
You know, I guess it's really a twofold problem. You know, we've seen an increase in gun carry over the past decade, and so we went pretty much doubled the number of permits in Mobile County from around 24,000 to 48,000 permits. But also we've seen an increase in the market for these stolen guns, and so the easy access to firearms and unlocked vehicles because of the number of them in the market driven by the streets.
So we have more people now possessing guns. Of course, that's something that's a trend around the nation as well. So how do we get to the point of where people are now seeing it as a, I guess, a profit center for them who are stealing things? I think you were telling me at one time it was petty thief compared to what's happening now.
Yeah, you know, at one time the auto burglar was more of a petty thief. They were basically going through the ashtrays looking for change, maybe radar detectors, anything that they could pawn or hawk, you know, to get some money. But what we're seeing is that guns specifically are being targeted by gun traffickers that are trafficking these weapons back into the street for about 10% of their value.
Now, Chief Batiste, you've been around law enforcement for a few years as a veteran law enforcement officer. How does this strike you now when you're seeing that more of the people who are having guns for safety reasons now becoming victims in this whole mechanism?
Well, you know, our take on it is that, you know, when young people are given access to weapons because they can't go into the academy or to the pawn shop to purchase a weapon, they're not emotionally equipped to deal with gun ownership, and it places our entire community at risk as a result of it. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why we kicked off this campaign, because we needed to ask the community to help us keep weapons out of the hands of young people, those that are less likely to have the mental maturity to deal with gun ownership.
So since the campaign launched and I guess more of a pronounced effort through local media supporting you as well, have you noticed any change in what's happening?
You know, I wish I could tell you that we have had a significant change, but we've seen a very slight change in guns being taken. I do want to point out that the number of guns we're talking about are just the ones reported to the police department.
Right.
And we think that number is, of course, quite a bit more because it is underreported. The gun used in Sean Tudor's slaying wasn't reported to us. And so, but it's not just a Mobile problem. We're seeing it as a regional problem. We're recovering guns that are taken from neighborhoods in Baldwin County now as well. And so we're seeing an increase in that.
So with the launching of the campaign, what type of time frame do you think that this will finally become something that, I think about some of the old campaigns like the one of litter and the old Indian chief, and I mean that thing is still ingrained in my brain today, and that's been years ago. How long does it normally take for something like this to have an effect on the community?
You know, I think it's going to have to be something that we constantly keep on the minds of the residents of this community and across the nation. When we stop thinking about it, then you won't ever see a real change or a shift into people not securing their weapons. I think that if we're looking at trying to provide some statistical data to talk about where we're going, I think it's going to take at least 6 months or to a year for us to be able to really look and see if we've had an impact on getting people to comply with what we're asking them to do. Because I just don't think that immediately you're going to see an immediate response to what we're seeing. But I think that if it stays fresh on our mind, we consistently put that message out there, especially with the media being engaged. You know, law enforcement has for years put stickers on people's cars and knocked on doors and tried to let people know through CAG meetings and stuff like that. But with the media being engaged, I think that it will help us get that message out there in a way that in some cases it's embarrassing for the gun owner that left the car unlocked, and you guys do stories on that, and so they don't want to be that person in their neighborhood that left their gun in the car and some officer lost his life or somebody in general lost their life. And so what you guys are doing, the PSAs, if it stays at the forefront of what we're doing, I think that over time we'll see an impact and a change in the process.
We're going to talk more about that point there about the gun owner who is now having to deal with the fact of their gun was taken. And as you mentioned, Director Barber, this is not just happening in Mobile. In fact, Baldwin County is also dealing with this very serious problem. We talked to Baldwin County Sheriff Huey Hoss Mack about his concerns, and we'll hear from him after the break. You know, one of the things we'll touch on here.
Most people really do just forget either to lock their vehicles, and some even forget that they have the weapon in the vehicle. A lot of times what we find, they're putting it in the glove box or the center console or perhaps underneath the seat. They don't normally carry the weapon on their person, but they want it in their vehicle for travel purposes. And over a period of time they forget, and so that's why it's so important. You know, we started a campaign in Baldwin County a few years ago that said lock it or lose it. and it was just to remind everybody to lock their vehicles. But we've added to that now. Don't just lock your vehicle, but if you do have a gun in there, make sure you take the gun out of the vehicle and take it back in the home.
And that's Baldwin County Sheriff Huey Haas-Mack sharing his thoughts with us on the problem. Now, last year in Baldwin County, 2018, 109 weapons were stolen in cases that deputies worked. Now, over half of that number were stolen from vehicles, many of them unlocked. And of course, again, with us, Director James Barber and Mobile Police Chief Lawrence Batiste. And we were talking about the fact that some of those same guns in Baldwin County have turned up in Mobile County. So that's an issue of this being a regional problem.
It is. And again, consider that's Baldwin County Sheriff's Department that worked those cases in the more rural areas. What we're seeing is Daphne PD is reporting them, as well as Fairhope and Foley. And so the municipalities and so that collective number is far greater than what you're hearing.
And I think the other point you made too is that more have not been reported on the front end of this, so we're still dealing with a number that's an unknown, I guess. Director Barber, we were talking while we were on a break, the point of what this is doing for someone who has bought a gun for protection, what they have created now in this situation of leaving it in their unlocked vehicle.
Many people, the legal ownership of these guns, they purchase these weapons in order to protect themselves and their family. But we want to raise the awareness, because if they think about it, these crimes happen in the middle of the night. And so you are arming a criminal with a gun that you provided and loaded just a few feet outside the front door where your family is sleeping. And so that awareness, if you think about it, it's almost like loading a gun, sticking it on your front porch and going to bed. And so we've got to change that habit, help us keep you safe, and certainly help keep our officers safe.
And that's very horrifying when you share from that perspective. If that doesn't wake a few people up this morning, I'm sure, the campaign combined with that. Now, as you look at the campaign, and as you mentioned, not getting the immediate results that you want, what's the next step? Where do you go next to try and change this sad habit that people are possessing right now?
Well, I think on this side, we're doing it. We're going to continue to say this, and you have got to say it over and over and over again, whether we're speaking to the public in an auditorium somewhere or here on camera, that we have got to drive this message and this awareness to at least stem the flow of these guns into the street as we deal with the traffickers with arrest and prosecution.
Some people are saying that this is about all you can do to a certain point because you don't want to punish again the victims, and the gun owners who have had their guns stolen in this situation are the victims. How do we stop that from happening for those who want to do a bit more?
Well, I think the legislators' automatic reaction, and we heard a lot of talk about making it a criminal act to leave a gun in a car unlocked, and we're in total disagreement with that. What you're doing is criminalizing an otherwise law-abiding citizen for a negligent act, and so we certainly don't want to criminalize the victim of a crime. Nobody has a right to go in your car. We understand that. Nobody has a right to remove anything. And so you're the victim of an auto burglary in that case. But we certainly want to raise the awareness, because nobody, and I can only imagine how the gun owner felt with the gun that was used in Officer Sean Tudor's case.
So what are the gun owners saying when you all hear from them when you're filing a report of that type of theft?
Well, one of the things that we would think would happen, that if you did make it a crime for a victim that left their vehicle, their weapon in their vehicle, simply they would just stop reporting the weapons being stolen, which would create an even bigger problem for us, because we wouldn't know the weapons are out there on the streets. The goal is for the victim to report that they had something happen to them, so that it gives us an idea of how many weapons may be out there on the street. The other thing, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, is the fact that there are a number of weapons that are recovered. I think you put the stats up there: 1,200 weapons stolen, 94 recovered. The problem with that 94 number, we recovered over 1,400 weapons last year. But of that 1,400, only about 600 of them had serial numbers, so that we could match them back to the property owner. That's significant to us, because if we can match a weapon back to a person that we recovered it from, and it turns out that it's stolen, then there's prosecution that can take place that maybe would take some of these guys off the street and limit some of the thefts that's occurring from some of the B&Es that are occurring.
So when does that step happen, where the serial numbers are recorded? When does that happen?
Well, it should happen when the gun owner make the purchase. I mean, when he's taking that weapon home, he should either, you know, with the technology that we have today, the very first thing he should do is take a picture of his weapon in its case. It's the original case. The serial numbers there. Most everybody has a cell phone that has camera capabilities, and so if we're able to do those things, and then there's some courts that we have at MPD that are at all the precincts that you can record all of the serial numbers to your weapons. But you know, we can take that even a step further. Not just weapons, all of the valuables in your home, you should have some way of identifying, you know, and so by recording that information really helps us in law enforcement reconnect you with your property if it's ever taken from you.
Right, and that's a main goal we're
right.
all hoping for. And you would think now, when we think about who has a cell phone, I mean, even the children in the household now, so you could make it a fun game activity, I guess, to make sure that you're recording all of your personal important property. But getting back to the gun ownership, as soon as that purchase is made, you need to be recording those numbers.
Correct.
You know, it's not only in that case, but a lot of people do individual purchases from other individuals, and so it's very important. And that is what makes it difficult for us to find out where that weapon came from, is because it may have exchanged hands several times, and the last owner may not even know the information of the last person that they sold it to. And so, serious problem. Complacency, of course, being our biggest issue right now to deal with. And, you know, most of these neighborhoods are very nice neighborhoods because those are the neighborhoods they're targeting. And so you have homeowners that feel safe and they feel like it's not necessary to lock their cars, but that's exactly the owner that they're looking for.
Well, some city leaders, as well as others in law enforcement, are now asking the Alabama State Legislature for help in this problem. The question is, though, can legislation be passed to hold gun owners more accountable and responsible? We talked to Representative Barbara Drummond. She takes us to the break with her perspective.
We will make it a local bill applicable to Mobile County because that's the jurisdiction of the sheriff. And then that bill would have to be advertised for 30 days. And then we will hope and push it through the said committees in Montgomery. So there's a process that we have to go through. We're hoping that we can get something done in this legislative session. If not, we'll try for the next one because the problem is not going away. I mean, when the police as well as the sheriff share the numbers of guns that are being confiscated as a result of those stolen in an unlocked vehicle, that's unconscionable. We've got to be more responsible. So I'm hoping a piece of legislation like this will help along with the campaign, which I say heighten the awareness for gun owners to be responsible.
And we're back again with Mobile's Executive Director of Public Safety, James Barber, and Chief of Police, Lawrence Batiste. And we heard from State Representative Barbara Drummond there. How do you see the state playing a role in starting a movement or making something on a bill to where it will help you in this task of ending this problem?
Well, let me first say that any gun legislation is very difficult legislation to get through Montgomery. We're a gun carry state. We understand that. And law enforcement themselves adamantly defend a person's right to legally own and defend themselves with a firearm. And so that's what makes it a very tough issue. But what you had was a lot of legislators. There was some interest in, again, criminalizing the act of leaving the gun, and we're totally against that. But one of the things to raise awareness is to somehow connect that to the pistol permit that you will acknowledge to be a responsible gun owner. And then in cases of extreme negligence, at least empower the sheriff to be able to revoke or suspend a permit from somebody that's just extremely careless.
I think one of the points that you made earlier is another way of looking at it, where if we criminalize it, then we may not have as many reported, thefts reported.
Of course. Again, you know, if I know that you're going to penalize me a second time for reporting that I've been the victim of a crime, I'm less likely to report what was taken out of my vehicle. I may report the B&E, someone breaking into my vehicle, but I'm certainly not going to report the fact that I had a weapon taken from it. You know, and particularly if it's a gun, people just are not going to put themselves in harm's way like that. You know, they're going to protect their right to gun ownership, and they're going to become defensive. And we don't want defensive victims. Right. Defensive victims makes it hard for us to do our job as law enforcement officers to keep the community safe. We need their cooperation in order to solve crimes in the community.
And as we make this more visible, are you reaching out to some of the gun owner groups like NRA, for one, to say, how can we encourage our members to be more responsible with this being a problem in our particular part of the state?
You don't know, we've not engaged the NRA. Again, we're not interfering with any legal right or ownership. We certainly don't agree with any legislation that makes it tougher on legitimate gun owners. And so there's really been no conflict with the NRA, and I think most gun owners as well as NRA members agree with us that people do have a responsibility in securing these weapons. But again, the appeal from law enforcement is help us keep you safe, help keep us safe, and let's make sure that these guns don't end up in the hands of the very criminals you're trying to protect yourself from.
I think that's a very good point of where we hopefully can pull everyone in to understand that it's not an issue about the Second Amendment or political party, but this is about making sure that the community is safe. Because I think that example you gave earlier makes it extremely real and visible to someone. Share that again in what you were talking about, what we do when we leave our weapon in an unlocked vehicle in our garage or in our carport.
Yeah, well, usually it's not in the garage, obviously. It's parked in your driveway or on the curb in front of your house. But the very weapon that you purchased and loaded to protect yourself and your family against the criminals, now just a few feet outside your front door in the middle of the night, you're arming a criminal with that very weapon. And he's just, again, just a few feet outside the door where your family is asleep. And so that type of activity is just incredibly shocking, I think, and that awareness of what is going on in our communities.
And you mentioned to me earlier that we are now working on as well a PSA that will be soon going into our system, so our viewers be able to see this as another reminder.
You know, yes, indeed. Channel 10 is also working on a PSA, and we're going to really focus on that, the officer slaying of Sean Tudor. That case really resonated with us because the reason we were after Perez, the reason we were trying to pick him up was on federal firearms charges and violating the conditions of his release. And so Sean Tudor was assigned to that case specifically through the intelligence group to get him back into the court so that we can stop again the gun traffickers. 2 days before that encounter, roughly, Perez was able to access, we believe, another weapon from an unlocked vehicle, which was used in the slaying of the officer. And
of course, that's a case that's very dear and on the hearts of all of us here in our community. Director Barber and Chief Batista, we thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we'll be continuing to support the campaign as well as getting that word out there, and we look forward to the Fox 10 spot here very soon.
Oh, well, thank you for having us.
Thanks. You both, gentlemen. And of course, for more information on the Mobile Police Department's Lock It Up program, you can call them at 251-208-6384. Now in Baldwin County, call the Sheriff's Office there, and that number 251-937-0202. Join us here next Sunday morning at 7:30 for Perspectives as we discuss issues and seek solutions. If you have any ideas of topics you'd like for us to address, drop it to us at perspectives@fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week.